School of Hokkaido University, the United Nations Universities, or the Center for Strategic and International Studies in the US. She has also served as a member of the House of Representatives of Japan, Director of the Committee of Foreign Affairs, and Director General of the Women's Bureau of the Liberal Democratic Party. Her areas of expertise include international peace building and preventive state theory, international negotiation and strategic studies, and also intercultural studies. And she has written and lectured extensively on this issue. Thank you very much, Professor Yamanaka, for being with us today. It's also a great privilege to have with us Caroline Scott, Deputy Head of the Australia's mission to ASEAN. She commenced in this position in late 2020, and prior to this, she provided high-level policy advice in the COVID Coordination Unit and advice on Pacific regional security at the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Canberra. She also has experience working with the United Nations, supporting Pacific Island countries to ratify and implement international human and labor rights conventions. Thank you and welcome with us, Caroline. And we are extremely happy to have with us also Adriani Uli Silalai, Ibu Uli from Kowani. She's the Vice President of the Economic Sector, the Cooperation and Medium-Sized Enterprise Department, and also Vice President of Foreign Affairs Department at Kowani, Indonesia. She has several degrees in science, economics, marketing, and public relations from Indonesian and also Australian universities. And she has been the CEO of a number of companies in Indonesia. Ibu Uli has also been very much involved in many leading global fora to support women economic empowerment. She's the chair of the Women 20 for the Indonesian G20 of next year, the coordinator for sustainable development of the International Council of Women at the UN, the vice president of the National Council of Women's Organization Indonesia, Kowani, as we were saying before, the head of the Permanent Committee for Other Traditional Sector and Interinstitutional Relations at the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, KADIN, and board member of the Indonesian Women Entrepreneurs Cooperative in Kowapi. Thank you again very much, Ibu Uli, for being with us. And also with us is Dr. Araba Say. Thank you very much, Araba. She's principal researcher with Research ICT Africa and a principal research scientist at the University of Washington Information School. And before that, she was leading a project on women and digital technologies at the United Nations University in Macau. And this is why and how we got to know her work. Araba studies the relationship between information and communication technologies, society, and socioeconomic development in different national and international contexts. And her research examines the factors underlying different types of digital and social inequality and explores ways to foster diversity and inclusion. And we had a very good collaboration with her. Thanks again, Araba. Now, I would immediately give the floor to Professor Akiko Yamanaka for our first opening speech of today. Over to you, Professor Yamanaka.
Thank you, Julia, for your kind introduction. It is my pleasure to be a part of this very timely gathering focused on the participation of women in the digital economy. This is particularly critical theme as we look forward to a post-COVID period ahead as women across the Pacific, Asia-Pacific region as well as ASEAN countries. And I do appreciate deeply for Australian aid who has prayed through its valuable work. First, I'd like to talk to you today about Japan and its response to the pandemic. As you may know, Japan is still facing wave after wave of infection. In spite of this, however, the total numbers of those infected and have died from the virus are still relatively low compared to the numbers in Europe, the US, and other developed countries. I believe that It has to do with awareness of the need of hygiene. I would like to introduce this idea very briefly. The Japanese population is very fastidious in their approach to hygiene. The custom of routinely rinse mouth and hand wash throughout the day are habits that are established from early childhood. The act of wearing, removing shoes when inside any house is normal behavior. Ever since the flu epidemic of 1918, the culture of wearing masks as a courtesy to prevent illness from spreading and even allergy has become normalized in Japan. And especially since the SARS outbreak in 2003, antiseptic solution has been widely available throughout the country, often provided for free, even at the public buildings and in public washrooms and so on. However, there is one tragic aspect of Japan's COVID-19 experience. It is a ratio of women who have committed suicide during the past year. In 2020, the number of self-inflicted deaths was 40% higher than in 2019. In the midst of this crisis for women, e-commerce and digital economy have offered a lifeline to many of those who are now jobless and forced to reinvent themselves from home. Even though Japan is a world leader in technology, its equipment is lagging behind other countries. Prime Minister Suga announced the setup of brand new digital agency this fall, and I do hope that women are focused on upskilling as a priority. The second theme I would like to touch upon today is that of promoting new values, new services, new businesses, and supporting entrepreneurship through the adoption of digital devices. One, the first priority is simply to have everyone able to learn basic technology skills and ensure that everyone has access to suitable equipment to work with. Two, by creating social networks, digital workers can be inspired by many more influencers and gain new appreciation for their own successful experience, learning to take risks, while also creating new learning opportunities around their failure. Three, being an entrepreneur carries specific risks that are not experienced by salaried employee, and for that reason, financial support must be provided to entrepreneurs as they start new values and new ventures. Four, the field in which digital economy are thriving most include health tech, including medical and health, as well as wellness and lifestyle. Technologies that can improve social resilience, like smart cities. Lifestyle enhancing technologies, apps that improve hygiene and sanitation, and digital solutions contribute to climate change and helping the environment. I will introduce one of the successful examples, that is Uber Eats. CEO is women. Network delivers service in cooperation with restaurant, cafeteria, and cafes. Uber was one of the first companies to launch a model that we now call gig economy, using only freelance workers, and is also built on digital platform. In closing, I would like to introduce the words of past senior Senator Leticia Shahani from the Philippines, the Secretary General of the UN Decade Women's Conference in Kenya in 1985. She said, "Peace is not a situation where there is no war. It is women who can teach our children the reality of war and peace as genuine teachers. True development is social, cultural, and political as well as economic. And equality between men and women is not simply the absence of discrimination. Rather, equality means granting women the right, opportunities, and responsibility to take part in their own development. I truly believe that the post-COVID-19 era is perfect opportunity to envision a new global digital economy. And I hope that this conference will serve as an important milestone along the way to a more equal and innovative future. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Yamanaka. And now I would immediately move ahead and invite Caroline for her remarks.
Thanks a lot, Julia, for convening this event today, and to fellow speakers Akiko, Hadriani, and Araba. And welcome to all the distinguished guests today. I'm really pleased to join you for this important event and learn from each of you throughout the discussion. The Australian government has a steadfast and ongoing commitment to promoting gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, and we do that through our commitments in our foreign policy strategy, economic diplomacy, trade negotiations, and development work. Our aid policy makes gender equality a key priority, development priority, and requires that all of our aid programs and investments promote gender equality. Our gender equality and women's empowerment strategy aims to uphold our international reputation as a global leader on gender equality and women's empowerment, and does that by strengthening our ability to engage in policy dialogues such as this in the region. And that work is led by our Ambassador for Gender Equality, Julianne Guevara. For Australia, ASEAN regional architecture is central to a stable, open, and inclusive and resilient Indo-Pacific. And our health, security, and economic recovery are closely connected to those of our Southeast Asian neighbours. COVID-19 is often obviously having a profound effect on health, social, and economic impacts across ASEAN. And it's clear that the pandemic is impacting negatively on gender equality, with women shouldering much of the economic burden, as they often hold less stable jobs, rely on the informal economy for their livelihoods, and may not be part of policy-making processes. There's a high risk that COVID-19 will roll back gains on gender equality and women's economic empowerment, leadership, safety, and resilience. The Australian government's committed to working with our partners to ensure that we don't lose on those gains. Putting women front and centre is a key to all of our economic recovery from COVID-19. Australia's international response on COVID-19, our Partnerships for Recovery, prioritises investing in gender equality and women's economic empowerment. Similarly, and consistent with that, the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework prioritises mainstreaming gender equality throughout the recovery and accelerating inclusive digital transformation. Australia strongly supports the use of digital technologies to achieve sustainable development and inclusive economic growth. For instance, through our Aid for Trade program, we support entrepreneurship, digital skills, and integration into the global marketplace. And it's increasingly important for women to access the skills and opportunities to participate and start their own businesses in the digital economy. Women leaders across the world have stood out for their success in responding to COVID-19 in their various roles. Women have been and are at the forefront of pandemic responses. I'd like to congratulate ERIA for their excellent discussion paper and policy brief on the participation of women in the digital economy across ASEAN. And I look forward to the discussion today and continuing to work with ERIA and our other partners to promote gender equality and women's empowerment in the digital economy, essential to our interests in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. And we will continue working in this issue, as you just mentioned. It was just the two papers you have seen in the chat box are just an appetizer, if you allow me this metaphor. Now I would go ahead and immediately invite our third speaker for the opening session, Ibu Uli. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Julia. Greetings to one and all. It gives me immense warmth and great pleasure to greet all your presence in interest of the entire committee. And it gives me tremendous pleasure to be presenting the welcome speech amongst the most estimated personalities and success women. On behalf of Kawani, let me begin by expressing our sincere appreciation to Professor Akiko Yamanaka Mrs. Caroline Scott, and Mrs. Arabase for attending the event and for attending of today's event. Under such recovering systematics and living of life in immersive technology, it is crucial to discuss women participant in digital economy. Technology advancement has indeed become inseparable and useful tool to enhance life skills, particularly on entrepreneurship and leadership. Next, please. KOANI is the largest and oldest women organization in Indonesia, built since 1928, and is the Federation of Indonesian Women Organization, which has 97 members of women organization in the world, or as many as more than 87 million Indonesian women members. Next, please. Would like to share with all women friends throughout the country that Indonesian women continue to and always try to develop knowledge to be able to help improve the standard of living of the family. Because of their family is prosperous, and we believe that the country's economy will be good too. KOANI is a member of the International Council of Women, we call ACW. And then we are also active in Asian sphere, in Asian Council Women Organization, and then we call Akiko. To develop business and encourage economy, KOANI annually holds KOANI Fair that provide a marketplace for women small, medium-sized enterprise to promote their business product directly to buyers. During 2020 pandemic situation, we even bring KOANI Fair to digital marketplace. This going digital allow KOANI Fair to have more participants to all over Indonesia in terms producer and buyer. We must say this is a blessing in disguise. The transformation to digital economy happened much more faster from we thought before. This time, digital economy has become the integrated part of our life. We have to be ready to support the process. And we believe for this today's event will be very helpful for us. We all hope this event of digital economy will give us more confidence toward digital economy. And at the same time, will from collaboration between our effort. Thank you for ERIA for organizing this event. Thank you very much and good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Ibu Uli. And I think now, before we're waiting for Araba's presentation, we will watch a very short video summarizing some of our key findings.
Women have been disproportionately affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And as the growth of the digital economy accelerates, narrowing the digital gender divide is key to build inclusive digital economies across the ASEAN region. While basic access to digital technologies and tools is relatively good for women, the ASEAN digital economy has predominantly benefited men. ASEAN girls and women, especially those in rural areas, lag behind when it comes to more advanced access to digital-related skills, jobs and careers, digital-driven entrepreneurship, and access to leadership positions in the digital economy. According to ERIA, the majority of ASEAN women entrepreneurs own and manage MSMEs, with more limited usage of sophisticated digital tools, if any. This means that women entrepreneurs across ASEAN are less likely to be able to compete and thrive in the digital economy. Increased participation of women in the digital economy can significantly contribute to the post-pandemic economic recovery of the region. Creating a safe digital environment requires fighting cyber violence and combating discriminatory practices, stereotypes, and biases associated with new digital technologies and tools. Most policy programs across ASEAN do not specifically address the gender divide. With this in mind, ERIA has put forward several policy recommendations. Policymakers need to reject cyber violence and fight potential discrimination, biases, and stereotypes that exacerbate the digital gender divide. Strategies and programs should make explicit reference to the digital gender divide and include initiatives to narrow it. Public-private partnerships should be encouraged to provide different forms of access to the digital economy for girls and women. Policymakers need to invest in better data collection to gain a better understanding of the participation of women in the digital economy across ASEAN and formulate more evidence-based programs. Policies should focus on the growing need to invest in more advanced types of access to the digital economy for women and girls, a broad and integrated set of measures.
Thank you. I hope that we managed to see the video effectively. Now, I would invite Araba to share the main findings of our work with us. Araba, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So I hope my slides are showing now. Perfect. I'd start by first acknowledging that it might seem a little strange to see an African woman talking about gender digital equality in Asia. But as Julia had said, I've been working on these issues from a global perspective, and it's been personally my pleasure and really interesting to look at the ASEAN case, especially because a lot of the issues around gender equality can be very context-based. And indeed, in the ASEAN case, the results showed some similarities, but also some interesting differences from the results in other regions of the world. In all cases, however, it's clear that gender digital equality is increasingly coming to the forefront of national, regional, and global agendas. And this is because more and more countries are acknowledging that gender digital equality matters, whether for ethical or economic reasons. I mean, I might argue that from the human development perspective, the ethical reasons are more important, but increasingly these days, economic rationales are becoming, having more power because they seem to be more convincing. So for whichever reasons, in the ASEAN region, which researchers have identified as having the fastest growing digital economy in the world, the question of who gets to participate in the economy and how have become critical, especially for post-pandemic recovery, as some of our speakers have already said. This new digital economy presents both opportunities and threats for women. There's opportunity in the flexible work opportunities enabled by digital platforms, such as the ability to work from home or build schedules around domestic responsibilities. But there are also threats in that the sectors that are most at risk of job loss due to automation happen to be heavily feminized sectors, such as the retail sector, business processing, outsourcing, the textile, clothing, and footwear sectors, which in some countries have a workforce that's over 70% female in the ASEAN region. In addition, the flexibility that digital platform enables could actually end up reinforcing gender norms around domestic roles by making it appear that women can easily achieve professional goals while remaining responsible for domestic chores. So to achieve equal participation in the digital economy requires understanding multiple dimensions that all have an impact on gender equality. First, equality in basic and meaningful access, as well as in basic and advanced skills, lays the foundation for equal employment and entrepreneurship opportunities in the digital economy. But we must also consider the harms and the risks that come with digitalization and which may present barriers or cause undesirable outcomes for women. It's also important to recognize the different identities people have, which can make inequality even worse for specific types of women and men, based, for example, on the geographic location, age, income, or education. So looking at access as a prerequisite, the data shows that the ASEAN region is actually performing really well compared to other world regions. So although there are gender gaps in most countries, as you can see from the two charts here, the first one is focused on ASEAN countries and the second is global regions. You can see that although there are gender gaps in all regions and in all countries, the gaps in the ASEAN countries are mostly much smaller than the average gaps in other regions of the world, including in the Asia Pacific region. And some studies have actually also calculated the ASEAN region to be performing much higher in terms of digital inclusion than the overall Asia Pacific region. However, the data doesn't capture intersectional inequalities that as I mentioned earlier. So for example, there's some individual studies in Myanmar and other countries that have indicated that there are larger gender differences in mobile phone and internet access in rural areas compared to urban areas. So this is an area where we basically need more data to be able to understand adequately what those differences are. Unfortunately, there is even less data available for the skills prerequisites. The latest data from the International Telecommunications Union on basic digital skills has no gender disaggregated data for ASEAN countries. I should note here, though, that the indicators that are currently collected, such as on basic skills, such as ability to use Excel sheets or to copy and paste from one program to another, are no longer adequate measures of digital skills. So we also need to get a sense of what are the skills that are needed now for the new digital economy, and how do we ensure that we are able to assess whether or not people are acquiring those skills. So there's some upgrading needed in the concept of digital skills. For advanced technology skills, enrollment and graduation in STEM programs are the most common indicators that are used. And the data here shows that although in some countries like Brunei and Myanmar, there is relatively high female participation in STEM and engineering programs. Overall, if you look at the first two columns compared to the second two columns, you can see that women tend to dominate the natural and social sciences, with relatively low proportions of women in science and technology related tertiary programs. Under digital leadership, there's again a scarcity of data globally and no comparable data on Asian countries. But the global trends seem to be representative of what's happening in particular regions. And these suggest that women are vastly outnumbered by men in ICT professions, and especially in top management and executive roles. To explore the ICT policymaking sphere, we collected some primary data in 2018. And that data showed that only 13% of countries worldwide had a woman in the topmost position of an ICT ministry or a telecom regulator. And as you can see from the map here, For the ASEAN region, there were no women ministers or heads of telecom regulators, at least in 2018. That may have changed slightly over the last 2 years. There's no data on digital entrepreneurship specifically, but as Julia mentioned earlier, some researchers have found that women entrepreneurs in Southeast Asia tend to run smaller businesses. They have less access to digital technologies and less access to information and business financing than male entrepreneurs. So this imbalance in the digital economy can be traced to multiple barriers, which range from infrastructure deficiencies in rural areas to gendered sociocultural norms that cut across geographic boundaries. There are also certain risks and harms that present additional challenges to women, even when they are able to overcome other barriers. And some of these are the tendency that as previously feminized jobs become digitalized, women tend to be pushed out of these jobs and they are taken over by men. Women also have to cope with the dual responsibilities of professional and domestic work, which leads to time poverty and high stress. There's a lot of research on time use research, which shows that women spend much more time per day or per week on unpaid domestic work compared to men. Sometimes several times more. Unfortunately, I think there's only one country in ASEAN for which that data is available. So that's also another area where more research would be useful. There's also work-related discrimination that women face when they do make it into the digital economy, such as gender pay gaps, harassment in the workplace, and limited access to training and advancement opportunities, as well as to business capital for those who are into entrepreneurship. And then online harassment and gender biases embedded in technology that leads to negative and unequal outcomes for women are also serious concerns. And unfortunately, sometimes instead of solving the problem, are used as reasons to inhibit or limit women's access to technologies. So finally, eliminating these barriers and mitigating the risks that I have mentioned needs to happen in parallel. And this requires targeting structural inequalities emerging from deeply ingrained gender norms and stereotypes, providing equal opportunities for boys and girls to develop basic and advanced skills, improving the conditions of work for female employees, which includes recognizing the value and the burden of women's unpaid domestic work, and making business support more available to female entrepreneurs. And finally, to address the numerous gaps in our knowledge, which this brief overview has demonstrated, we need to collect more and better gender disaggregated data. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Araba. Indeed, let me add that the issue of data was a crucial one during our studies, and this is something that we will also discuss a little bit more in detail next Wednesday during our panel discussion. And something I also would like to add is that, as Araba very clearly detailed and was also showed in the video, something that very interestingly emerged from our work is clearly that while the ASEAN region is not doing bad at all with respect to basic metrics of access in general, then of course, if we look at women in rural areas or in other situations, the picture could be different. The gap really emerges when we look at more sophisticated indicators, STEM skills, women in a position of leadership. But this is clearly a big issue because, again, the good job of the futures will be those created in digital related areas. And therefore, if we don't have equality in these sectors, we may risk to see a very unequal post-pandemic recovery. And this is why we think this is a very, very important issue to discuss and tackle. And I think this brings us very well into the time that we have allocated to Q&A. And I said that there are some questions that are coming into the chat box, but please feel free to ask more questions to our speakers. And perhaps I would like to start by asking a question to Caroline. Caroline, in her opening speech, mentioned that Australia strongly emphasizes women economic empowerment in its foreign policy. So I would like to ask her to elaborate a little bit on the main programs and actions that Australia has developed during the pandemic to support women entrepreneurs and women economic empowerment more in general across ASEAN. Caroline, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Julia. Well, as I said when I started, with our aid investments, all of them have to promote gender equality by design. And when the pandemic hit, we actually did a review of all of our development programs to ensure that they were contributing to the international response to COVID, including with respect to economic recovery. And so gender equality is mainstreamed across all of that. In terms of some specific initiatives, obviously there's the work such as the event today through ERIA that looks, at research and policy advice and advocacy and capacity building with respect to economic recovery, and in particular looking at the gendered aspects of that, such as the event today. We also support the Shaping Inclusive Finance Transformations program, the SHIFT program, and that improves access to financial services for low-income women in ASEAN. And during the pandemic, SHIFT helped to maintain economic activity in the region despite the travel bans, isolation, and social distancing by facilitating the uptake of digital finance products, including an e-wallet for remittances, insurance services, and access to credit. So it was one of the important new initiatives. Also, our digital trade standard programs also supports economic recovery pillar of the Partnerships Recovery Strategy. And that looks at digital financing, supply chains, reopening borders, all of these sorts of things. And that has gender equality mainstreamed across it as well. So trying to increase access to women, for digital transactions, finance, and those sorts of things. So it is mainstreamed across everything we do, including in our broader programs, such as our large economic development program, the ASEAN Australia community development program, there's just a couple of the key ones. The SHIFT program, digital trades, and ERIA probably being some of the bigger ones, more specific ones during the pandemic. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Caroline. I would like to take one question that you have in the chat box and address it to Araba, but please, if any of the other speakers would like to intervene, Ibu Uli, Professor Yamanaka, Caroline, just wave your hand and I will give you the floor. So there's a question about the role of men. So basically, how men can help women to achieve better equality in the digital economy. So Araba, what would you reply to this question from the audience? And also, there's a second part of the question about what measures of equality, and this I think goes back to one of the first slides from Araba. Equality may mean different things. So if you can elaborate a little bit on that, Araba, that would be great. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. This is not an easy question. I think for men to help women is to help women help themselves. I think that's ultimately should be a goal. So in supporting, starting at a very early age, supporting daughters, if you have them, if they're interested in non-traditionally female professions, you should encourage them. Try to break down stereotypes, again, at a very early age, so that boys and girls, sons and daughters growing up don't think of specific types of jobs as being male or female. And this applies equally to males because we tend to think of these stereotypes in terms of, as negative towards females because they are seen as not being appropriate for certain types of jobs. But you could also think of it from the male perspective, where there are also certain jobs that are considered to be non-male, or it's not seen as appropriate or a good thing for a man to do certain types of jobs because it's women's work. And breaking down those boundaries as well would help to bring up a generation of youth that are already ready to accept different types of people in different types of roles. Now, this for me, my focus these days is really on the generation to come. I think most of us right now will not be, those of us who are older, may not be able to change our ways so easily. And so while we're trying to, adapt to the new, more inclusive environment, I think a lot of our energy should go towards preparing the next generation. And what we can do to help the next generation, what you males can do to help the next generation, is to model the behavior that you want the next generation to model. Another key area I'd say has to do with gender roles in the home. And again, men and women taking on more equal responsibilities for all the different types of duties that are required in the home would also help to relieve some of the pressures that women face, having to deal with both professional and domestic burdens, which makes it difficult for them to take on certain types of jobs, especially digital economy jobs, which require a lot of out of hours type work. And for women who want to do that type of work, they may not be able to take time away from their family when they need it to travel or things like that. So being able to have also balance in their domestic roles, I think would be an important way to help women to succeed and to thrive in workplaces where they are not having additional burdens to men. In terms of measurements, as Julia said, equality can mean different things to different people. So I think it will have to the measurement will have to depend on the context and what the issues in that particular context are. If the issue is that women don't want to go into technology careers because they feel that there's the workplace is a place of harassment, then the measure of equality will be a reduction or elimination of harassment in the workplace. If they are not going into technology careers, or they're finding it difficult to succeed in technology careers because there's too much work at home, domestic burdens, then the measure of equality will be a reduction in the domestic burden. So you'll have to look at the particular situations in order to decide which measure would be the most appropriate one. The important thing is that the opportunities are there for women who want to go into these careers. Not all women have to, and there will be women who don't want to, and that's okay. But those who want to should have the opportunity to do so.
Thank you very much, Araba. I see that there are a few comments in the chat box about skills. Skills, we know, are a fantastic vehicle to promote inequality and opportunity. More skills means empowerment, typically. I have a question to you, but then I would just ask to the other fellow speakers if they want to add anything. How can we incentivize more girls to, go into STEM careers, scientific disciplines, to acquire those kinds of skills that are somehow very important for the digital economy? Araba, what can you tell us?
how can we incentivize girls? I think one of the first steps would be similar to one of the points I made earlier, which is that from a very early age, showing the opportunities that lie in different fields, not just the traditionally feminine sectors. So making it clear that those sectors are also available to women. And when they express interest in doing things that are traditionally not considered feminine, not discourage them. Sometimes just even in our language, not discourage them from doing those kinds of things. Breaking down that barrier again, where as you're growing up, you know, the girl is in the kitchen helping her mom, and the boy is, you know, out playing, you know, football or playing with video games, that sort of thing. Again, will enable girls not to see that aspect of life as being male, belonging to boys, but also to girls. Having more role models, more female role models in these sectors, and making them visible to young girls so that they can also imagine and aspire to being in those careers would be also, I think, a good step. And then getting rid of, you know, a lot of the negative experiences that women do tend to have when they try to enter these fields will also be important in order not to discourage women from aspiring to technological jobs. And then working with men. I think, again, just as we try to break down some of the norms around femininity, also breaking down some of the norms around masculinity and what it means to be a man would be an important way to break down that artificial barrier between, you know, feminine jobs and masculine jobs.
Thank you, Araba. I don't know, Professor Yamanaka or anyone else, would you like to add anything to the discussion?
Probably from a slightly different point of view, in Japan there is a huge program of the generation gap, especially on this digital or IT or e-commerce. So relatively not just men and women, but the generation who is the director or director general, most of them are men, and who can't access because always they are grown up with the secretary, so secretary can do all the things. So I think that in Japan, the reason why our equipment and also training system is far behind is because this is a society of, as you know quite well, according to international political union, Japanese women politicians can be counted 166, very low. So the number of the House of Representatives of Japan is actually women is less than 10%. So I think that in order to really change this, I really hope that this digital and e-commerce, which I explained about Uber Eats, but women and not only women, but younger people started to do small business or entrepreneurship, and they are very successful. So if you look at the Japanese economy during this COVID-19, it's not so down because those young people, but a big company and also a big company not really require the younger people to work at home, remote work, because directors can't understand what is remote work. So this generation gap in Japan will be, I think that in 10 years, the things are going to be changed. So this is a very good opportunity for us Japanese to really take this opportunity to really make the women in college to do more access to digital, and then probably how to use those ITs and things like that. Younger women and younger men will teach the elderly people. So this, for Japan, it's really critical situation. That's why I think that maybe this is more important for Japanese people rather than ASEAN people, because ASEAN and the other Asia Pacific, of course, Australia and other part, I think that this is totally different program, and Japan is very, very behind. But still, I think that I have really a hope, because everybody started to talk about probably after COVID-19, something will change, the society will change, where we should go. So I think that this kind of course, we have to really encourage more women and more people to really join this actually remote and conference and things like that. But, and this again, I was told by a very high-ranking government people how you are going to access with this Zoom conference. They can't do by themselves. So that's a kind of, unfortunately, Japan has a very serious problem. However, I really hope that the younger people are really more active and then challenging. So that's why we need to, not only Japan, but also the people who can have enough income can really, I think that put the money for your own learning. But the people who can't really have any access to this digital training, or as probably Abba said, like, and also equipment, we need to really support, as well as entrepreneurs, the government support to really give the opportunity, and then the financial support is really needed. So we have to think where the financial support should go is different from the nation states or the situation. But we all have to really work together, and then share the information is very important, because we can learn each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Yamanaka. We have only a few minutes left, so I think I will address this question, a final question to Araba, because it's also something that somehow we covered in the paper, so you can find more information in the document on it. So there's a question in the chat box about cyber violence. What can ASEAN countries learn from other countries about policy that can support can support women in the digital economy by actually fighting this kind of violence and harassment online, which we have identified as a key barrier. It's a kind of a prerequisite. If we want women to participate in the digital economy needs to be a safe environment for them. Araba, what can you tell us?
Very briefly, since there's not much time, I'd say that I don't think ASEAN necessarily there's anything to learn from other countries, because I think other countries are also struggling to figure that out, how to deal with cyber violence. So on the other hand, ASEAN could actually be a leader by coming up with, trying to find ways to first capture and understand the types and extents of cyber violence going on, because it's really very poorly documented at the moment. And then coming up with policies, experimenting with policies if necessary, but also implementing policies that are enforceable, because that's one of the challenges with cyber violence, that it's difficult to enforce. but finding ways to have policy regulation, repercussions for cyber violence that might then serve as an example for other countries in the world.
Thank you, Araba. And let me add that I think that also, beyond policy, public policy, the private sector has a very important role to play. I mean, as highlighted in the paper, sometimes there are stereotypes or, even potential biases or discriminatory practices that are arising, from technology developed in the private sector. Therefore, again, it's really about all of us thinking about these threats and issues that are becoming even more important because we spend so much of our time online. And again, I mean, even from a private sector perspective, there's a huge role to play. But I see that more questions are coming. I would like to reassure our participants and invite them to come back next Wednesday because we will be discussing more in detail with our panelists issues linked to skills, to again, cybersecurity, and also entrepreneurship in a digital sphere. So I hope that the panel discussion of next Wednesday can address some of these questions that we didn't have the time to discuss. But just before closing, I would like to ask Ibu Uli and Caroline if they have any final comment before we close. Ibu Uli.
Hi. I just want to add something that regarding what happened nowadays in Indonesia currently right now. We are, because of pandemic situation that I just already informed before, that digital economy is the much more is just happen faster that we thought before. So nowadays that women or girls, and they just is already very useful for using the digital everything. So especially for the pandemic situation, currently not now, is most of us is already moved into the digital economy, such as we are already buying the groceries and even the vegetable and everything. So we are already familiar. We use the digital economy like this, and we use the for their e-commerce. So the thing is, from this part, we just want to say that it's true that we need to understand and more to put for women and then for the girls more skill for the digital, the technology. So everything so we can deliver for their women and girl is they really understand about the digital economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Caroline, any final word from your side?
Thanks, Julia. I mean, just drawing on sort of the last question, just to say how important it is also to promote gender equality in education so that the girls are getting the STEM skills that they need to then go into these careers as entrepreneurs and in the digital economy. And just drawing on what was said before about the importance of having role models. If, girls can't see these people and don't know women are out there doing these great things in the digital economy, they won't think that they can do it themselves. So it's really important to have those role models and promote them, and also mentorship programs can be useful as well. But thanks for convening such an interesting event.
Thank you very much. I think we are really running out of time. So again, I hope that we will be able to welcome all participants back this Thursday at 1 p.m. and we will continue the discussion there. I would like to thank once again all speakers, Professor Akiko Yamanaka, Caroline, Ibu Uli, and Araba for being with us. And please stay connected because there will be more to come on this issue of women in the digital economy from ERIA. Thank you very much again, and I think that we can close the meeting now. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
See you again, Araba, on Thursday.
Yes.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Thank
you.
Bye. Thank you very much, Professor Yamanaka again, and Ibu Uli.
Thank you. You too. Thank you. Thank you all. Bye.